From the macabre minds of Laughing Devil Production comes another story from the Nightshade Diary. You know what that means. Check under the bed and make sure no one or nothing is there. Is the closet door securely shut? Then leave your disbelief behind, amp up your imagination, and hang on tight for another ride into terror and mystery. And like all good horror stories, just imagine it's a dark and stormy night. And remember, screaming like a little girl is permitted. Final Exam by Jennifer Roberson. He was, she thought, a rather ordinary man, certainly unremarkable in looks, although his eyes were rather nice. Warm brown eyes, but just a trifle myopic. He peered back at her worriedly. She found this rather amusing in view of the circumstances. A distinctly common young man, she thought, nodding to herself. Nice eyes, yes, but then eyes weren't everything, were they? His other attributes, such as they were clearly nondescript. Mousy brown hair, clean but in need of cutting, features of a distinctly average cast, although the nose was a bit too long, and the height and weight of at least 100 men who inhabited her father's castle, which made him utterly ordinary and not in the least heroic. But then he wasn't a hero, so she supposed it didn't matter. She chewed her bottom lip, thinking of her father. No doubt he would worry once he came round to it. After all, his youngest daughter had disappeared through no fault of her own. It was entirely likely, right at this very moment, he was summoning up all the royal armies, since there was nothing else for them to do, and setting them to the task of combing the woods for her, threatening whippings for one and all if they didn't turn her up. Well, they wouldn't. He had made sure of that. He sat there, peering at her myopically, wondering now that he had her, what to do with her. She sighed, rearranged her skirts, crossed her legs beneath the table, and gazed straight back at him. He also sighed. He didn't know what to say, and so he said the very first thing he could think of. You are a virgin, aren't you? At home, she would have been shocked because being shocked was expected of her. But she wasn't at home at present, and therefore the expected responses were completely unnecessary, which meant she could say whatever she felt. What she felt was laughter. This wasn't what she had been warned by all of her chamber ladies to expect from ravishers. Supposedly, ravishers never asked such things, regarding virginity as unimportant, since if she were one, she wouldn't be for much longer, and therefore it really didn't matter. But he hadn't ravished her yet. She lifted red eyebrows, not auburn or red, in the eloquent manner she had been most carefully taught. The peculiar feminine language of elegantly arched brows was meant to convey carefully measured, outraged condensation. But she hadn't practiced much, and she wasn't very good at it. Besides, her eyebrows were always mutiny and remained rebelliously straight. Still, it was up to her to try. Her women had labored so hard. I beg your pardon? She used the fluting, plummy tones all the other ladies of rank employed. He blinked, reddened, attempted to loosen the high collar of his wheat-colored apprentice's tunic. I'm sorry. I'm not doing this very well. I'm new at it, you see. You're my first victim. Am I? She brightened. She was never first in anything, having 4 sisters in front of her. He nodded gravely. But I had to ask, you know. The spell requires a virgin. Spell? She brightened still more. You mean magic? Oh, yes. His embarrassment faded, replaced with indulgent self-confidence, which she thought alien to his open, boyish features, and therefore looked a trifle odd. It's all in the books, you know. The virgin daughter of a king. Oh, well, she was the daughter of a king, and she was a virgin, but she didn't tell him yet, hoarding it for herself. A gentleman never asks. The confidence disappeared. He doesn't? No. Then how does one find out? It was a fair question, she thought, but she didn't have an answer. Perhaps one just knows. But I don't know. He was looking worried again. It has to be a virgin, otherwise it won't work. She considered it for a moment, then leaned forward and asked carefully, "What won't work?" "The spell," he said testily. "I told you that already." "Yes, well, you have, but you haven't told me why." She set an elbow against the table and leaned her chin into the heel of her hand. "I think it's only fair, me knowing why. After all, you did bring me here against my will." "I did, didn't I?" His tone and expression were glum. "Well, I'm sorry if I frightened you, but I was only doing what I was told." "To steal women?" "To steal a woman," he clarified. "Specifically, the virgin daughter of a king." He shrugged. "I might have asked. I'm the sort who would rather ask, really, but the books all said it was quite impossible to find a willing virgin princess, so I'd better be ready to steal one." He sighed. "If I wanted the spell to work." "Which of course you do," she nodded angrily, then leaned farther forward yet. "What is this spell for?" He brightened. Apparently, even this young man, caught squarely between boyhood and adulthood, enjoyed doing the one thing she learned all men like to do: talk about himself. "It's for my final exam," he explained. "I'm only an apprentice wizard, you see, but I'm behind all the others. If I fail this time, they'll dismiss me from school and I'll never graduate." She frowned. She herself disliked lessons, preferring instead to sit in a window seat and dream, or to read a book, which, she had been told numerous times, was really quite the same. "Would it be so bad if you were dismissed? I mean, what kind of a school expects young men to steal young women simply to satisfy graduation requirements?" He sighed heavily. "This one does, I'm afraid. It's stated clearly in the catalog. In order to graduate, all spells must be completed according to the requirements of the various courses included in the student's specific curricula." She nodded, an exacting requisite. "Which course is this one you've stolen me for?" He drew himself up on the stool. "I'm not allowed to say." She was astonished. After all, he'd stolen her. The least he could do was say why. Explicitly, she told him so. He was visibly deflated and visibly depressed. "You have a point," he agreed. "But it says nothing at all in the books about the Virgin Princess knowing about the spell." "Well, this princess wants to know," she declared purposely, leaving out the word virgin, which she was, but now thought it a distinct disadvantage, in view of the circumstances. "You really are being quite unfair, you know. Regardless of what it says in the books, I mean, a lady likes to be prepared. She likes to know whom she might be meeting or where she might be going. Will it be an intimate dinner or a full-blown festive feast?" She smiled, trying not to sound terribly pompous. But he was not the sort of young man who would know about feasts or intimate dinners. "You must understand, of course, that a princess has to know these things. It just isn't fair to surprise her because she can't do her job." He sighed. "But if I told you and you didn't like it, what would I do then?" She thought about it. "Well, you could put a binding spell on me so I couldn't run away, or perhaps make me temporarily mute." She shrugged. "That's a popular spell, particularly with mother-in-laws." He considered it, nodding thoughtfully, then sighed dolefully. "It's a dragon summoning." That set her back on her stool. "What?" "I need you to summon a dragon. You know, like in all the stories." He nodded encouragingly. Virgins are gourmet items where dragons are concerned. The spell is guaranteed. This really was too much. I've read those stories too, she said. The dragon devours the virgin. He refused to look at her. Yes, I'm afraid so. That's the way it always works. She drummed fingers on the tabletop. I'd really prefer not to be devoured. His expression was apologetic. I'm afraid you have no choice. It's only after the dragon's eaten that it's safe to take a tooth, because then he's deeply asleep. She frowned. Why do you want a tooth? To prove I summoned the dragon. He spread his hands ruefully. The professors don't really want a whole dragon, you see. He wouldn't fit in the dorms, and we can't keep feeding him people. But they need proof the spell worked. And so they want a tooth? He nodded, saying nothing. She sighed, frowning in irritation. I really don't want to be devoured. I'm game for a lot of things, but that's not one of them. She saw the look on his face, a combination of dismay and determination. Of course, it's all academic anyway. Mal's brown eyebrows lowered. Why? Coyly she batted lashes. Because I'm not a virgin. He was horrified. Not? Not. At all? At all. Either you are or you aren't. She began to smile, caught up in her embroidery. It was quite a scandal, you know. Here I was, the youngest of the king's daughters, and no virginity. My father threatened to beat me blue, but my mother said to ignore it. She shrugged. I'm only a fifth daughter, which means they can marry me off to some licorice old man who wouldn't know the difference between a virgin ewe and a virgin woman. She sighed dramatically. It was really quite a to-do. Yes, I can imagine. He was plainly agitated. What about your sisters? 4 of them, you said? She scowled. Lying, she saw, didn't always have the desired results. As much as she resented her 4 sisters for being born before she was, the hand-me-downs were already so badly worn, she didn't really want any of them devoured any more than herself. They're all married, she lied, and some of them even have babies. He sank into deep despair. I'll never graduate. She shook her head. There may be another way. How? He inquired glumly. Bring me this book of spells. Aghast, he said. I can't. Can't or won't. She stabbed the table with a finger. Bring it here now. I know you must have homework. Well, then you must have a textbook as well. He sighed, got up, and went to a shelf. Brought back a battered book. Used, he said. All the new ones were gone. Show me the spell, she told him. Maybe there's something you're missing. He peeled back the pages, then pointed to one of the incantations. That one, he said. I have everything I need, except, of course, the virgin. Frowning, she read the ingredients. Indeed, it did appear complete. But she thought there might still be a way. Throw out the bat, she said. Replace it with Eye of Newt. There's already is an Eye of Newt. His finger indicated the ingredients. Get another Eye of Newt. Don't they have 2 after all? But the bat's got to go. But that's what the spell calls for. Right here it says 1 bat stripped of hair. He shrugged. I guess dragons don't like hair. Her hand strayed to her own. I've got hair. Maybe it's only bat hair. She made a mew of distaste, wrinkling her nose. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. Get rid of that bat as well as the hair, and bring me an Eye of Newt. I hope you know what you're doing. Oh, yes. I'm a very good tutor, and I've already graduated. That too was a lie, but she thought it worth a try. She closed the book and rose. Collect the things you need, and let's go summon a dragon. They went, but only after she promised not to try and escape. At length she agreed, since she knew he'd put a spell on her if she hadn't, which made him happy since he knew his spell might go awry and turn her into a toad or something equally distasteful. Not far from the wall of night, which encircled the school buildings and hid them from prying eyes, was a small clearing in the forest. The small clearing boasted very flat ground, withered vegetation, a post adorned with chains, and a carpet of gritty ash. It was a lab used expressly for dragon summoning, since not even the professors wanted a dragon inside the wall of night. She stamped around the clearing, raising choking grayish clouds, and held up embroidered skirts. This place could use a woman. He looked pointedly at a post and chain. This place has used many women. Yes, well, you know what I mean. She ignored the post entirely, looking instead at his lumpy bag. Shouldn't you get about it? He sighed and knelt, untying his bag with a spoken word that did the work for him. That spell he knew very well, and then laboriously, one by one, he drew from the bag various bottles and packets containing ingredients. And 2 eyes of newt, he said, then paused. Or is it eye of newts? She waved her hands. Just do what you have to do. He thought about it. Well, first of all, I have to put you in chains. Skip that part, she said hastily. Go on with the summoning. He frowned doubtfully. But these things have to be done just so, in a special way, and in a specific order. If I skip anything, his voice trailed off dolefully. All right, very well, if it's that important to you. She marched over to the post, slipped her wrists into the chains, pointedly left them unlocked. This will do, I should think. The dragon will never know. He scratched his head and began to assemble the ingredients in their proper order, putting them into the mortar. He chanted as he did it, pestling carefully, but she couldn't be certain if he was performing the ritual or just going over things by rote. At last he was satisfied, carefully transferred all the litter to his bag, being inherently a neat person, then poured the mixture into an enameled bowl, which he then placed in the center of the clearing. It should work, he said, more for his own benefit than for hers, she thought. I followed directions carefully. Of course, I'm not certain about that second eye of newt. Never mind the eye of newt. Loudly she rattled her rusty chains. Just finish the silly spell so I can get out of here. It seems odd that an eye of newt can substitute for a royal virgin, he murmured. I mean, if it were true, you'd think the professors would be more interested in saving lives than in saving face. He really was a stubborn individual. She rattled her chains again. Just cast the spell, will you? I'd like to be home in time for dinner. Well, all right. He backed up, knelt, prepared himself, then began chanting words she'd never heard. The requisite dragon appeared on cue, astonishing them both. A large, lumpy dragon, appropriately green, blinking at them in a mild dragonish way, clearly as surprised as they were. Well, the dragon observed, I'd planned on going to bed. The girl observed him closely. Something she thought was wrong. You're not smoking, she said. Oh no, not any more. The dragon shook his head. The ordinance, you know. The apprentice wizard sighed. Then I did do everything right. Well, the dragon tilted his head from side to side. That depends on what you intended. I am a dragon, yes, but not quite a normal one. The apprentice wizard froze. Not. The dragon chewed a toenail. I'm a bit of a health nut, you know. No red meat for me, which is why I came, of course. You left out that disgusting bat. In her unlocked chains, she gasped. You mean? I mean, I'm a vegetarian. The dragon chewed another nail. It's really much better for you. No more brittle bones to worry about, no more unnecessary carnage. Thoughtfully, he smiled. I should think the virgins particularly would be grateful. Well, she said finally, no more need for these. And she shed her noisy chains and moved away from the post. The dragon cast her a jaundiced glance. Tricky virgin, aren't you? But what if I did eat meat? The apprentice gaped at her. You mean you are? Of course, she replied airily. I'm a very picky, tricky woman. Now, rumbled the non-smoking dragon, what was it you wanted me for? A tooth, the apprentice answered. Have you one to spare? Oh, several. At my age I lose a lot. But why do you want one? So I can pass my final exam. I need to graduate. A worthy cause. The dragon twisted his massive jaws a moment, did something with his tongue, spat out a large tooth. Broken a bit, I'm afraid, but it should be enough. Carefully the apprentice picked it up and tucked it into a pocket. Thank you very much. Don't mention it. I'm in favor of higher education. The dragon worked on a third toe, spat out excess nail. Why don't you ask a kiss of the lady? You're due congratulations. The young man reddened. Me? It won't kill you, you know. Startled, the girl shook her head. I'd really rather not. The dragon stared down his nose. Too high and mighty, are we? Too good for the likes of him? No, no, it's not like that. Then give him a kiss, my girl. Won't kill you, you know. I really don't think. The graduate scowled at her. You're only a fifth daughter. She scowled back. That really isn't the point. Then come here and give me a kiss. My, but he was domineering. Not at all the polite young man he'd been before they summoned the dragon. She wasn't sure she liked the change. Very well, she agreed at last, but remember, I'm still a virgin. I don't really do it right. He crossed the clearing to her. That's all right, I do. It was not a long kiss. Her kisses never were. The dragon's smile faltered. In shock, he forgot the ordinance and blew a crooked smoke ring. Oh, he said, one of those. The princess looked down at the frog. 104, she sighed.